On June 3, 2026, the USDA confirmed what Texas ranchers had been afraid of for over a year. The New World screwworm was back on American soil. 3 days later, a second calf turned up 5 miles away. Then 2 more. 4 confirmed cases. The first in 60 years. And here's the part that should make you sit up. America didn't just get rid of this thing the first time. America launched one of the most insane, brilliant, and expensive biological warfare operations in the history of agriculture to kill it. It took 30 years. It cost billions. It worked so completely that most people alive today have never even heard of the screwworm. It was supposed to be gone forever. Stay with me, because the story of how we killed it the first time is one of the wildest things a government has ever done. And the story of how it came back is the reason ranchers in South Texas aren't sleeping right now. Before anyone figured out how to kill the screwworm, every rancher in the American South knew exactly what it was. Every cattle hand checked wounds twice a day because if you missed one, a scratch from a fence, a tick bite, a fresh belly button on a newborn calf, the flies would find it before you did. And what happened next was the part that haunted people. A female screwworm fly could smell an open wound from miles away. She'd land on it, lay up to 300 eggs in the raw tissue, and leave. Within 12 hours, the larvae would hatch and start eating. But they didn't just eat. They released a chemical that stopped the wound from closing. The wound couldn't heal. It just stayed open, getting wider, attracting more flies, more eggs, more larvae. A single wound could end up holding thousands of them. The animal was being eaten alive, and its own body couldn't fight back because the parasites wouldn't let it. Ranchers in the 1950s were losing $1.8 billion a year to this. Adjusted for today's money, entire herds had to be inspected animal by animal, wound by wound, every single day. You couldn't leave cattle on open range. You couldn't take a day off. If you ran livestock anywhere below the Mason-Dixon line, the screwworm was the thing that never let you rest. And then 2 scientists at a USDA research station in Menard, Texas, had an idea so crazy that nobody believed it would work. Their names were Edward Knipling and Raymond Bushland. And the idea started with something Knipling noticed in 1937 while watching screwworm flies in the lab. The female screwworm mates once, just once in her entire life. 1 shot. If the male she mates with happens to be sterile, she'll still lay her eggs, but none of them will hatch. She won't try again. She doesn't know the difference. She just lays dead eggs and moves on. Knipling stared at that behavior for a long time, and then he said something that no entomologist had ever said before. What if we breed millions of male screwworm flies, blast them with radiation to make them sterile, and then drop them out of airplanes over the entire southern United States? If we flood the wild population with enough sterile males, every wild female that mates with one of ours produces nothing. Do it long enough and the population crashes to zero. The room did not love this idea. But Bushland figured out the piece that made it possible. He worked out how to breed millions of screwworm flies in a laboratory using ground meat, beef blood, and a chemical preservative. Without that method, Knipling's theory stays on paper forever. With it, they could produce flies by the tens of millions. It took almost 20 years to get the money. But in 1954, they got their first test. A tiny Caribbean island called Curaçao. The local goat population was being destroyed by screwworm. Knipling's team flew in, set up a lab, and started dropping millions of sterile flies from small planes over the island. 4 months later, the screwworm was gone from Curaçao. Completely. 0 cases. The goats were fine. The headlines called it a victory of Adam and romance. After that, the funding came fast. Florida was next. In 1958, sterile flies were dropped across the entire state. By 1959, the screwworm was gone from the American Southeast. Then they turned west. Texas, Louisiana, the whole Gulf Coast. State by state, millions of sterile flies raining out of cargo planes every week, mating with wild females who would never produce living offspring. By 1966, the United States was officially declared free of the New World screwworm. But they didn't stop, because the flies were still alive in Mexico. And as long as Mexico had screwworm, it could walk right back across the border. So the US and Mexico built a joint commission and kept pushing south, through Mexico, through Guatemala, through Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, all the way down to Panama. where they built a permanent barrier at the Darien Gap. The Darien Gap is a jungle so thick there's no road through it. The Pan American Highway, the road that runs from Alaska all the way to Argentina, stops dead at the Darien Gap and picks up again on the other side. That's where the flywall lives, right in the one place on the continent where geography itself creates a bottleneck. In Panama, a facility called COPEG still runs today. It produces 100 million sterile flies per week. Those flies get loaded onto planes and dropped along the Darien Gap in a living wall of sterile males that has kept the screwworm out of North America for over 2 decades. That's the defense. 100 million sterile flies per week, dropped from planes, across a jungle, forever. And for 60 years, it held. Then the line started to break. The last time the screwworm touched American soil was 2016, when it showed up in the Florida Keys and started killing endangered key deer. They stopped it in time. Barely. In 2024, screwworm cases began appearing in southern Mexico, moving north. By early 2025, the fly had reached northern Mexico. In August 2025, the first human case in the U.S. was confirmed, an international traveler who'd picked it up in El Salvador. And in June 2026, the larvae showed up in a Texas calf's belly button, then another, then 2 more. 4 cases in 1 county in 1 week. Right now, ranchers in Zavala County are doing something their grandparents did every day but they've never had to do in their lives: checking every animal, every wound, every belly button on every newborn calf. Quarantine zones are in place. Animal movement is restricted. And every time a fly lands on a cut, there's a question that didn't exist 3 weeks ago. Is that one of ours, or is that one of theirs? The USDA isn't waiting to find out. On February 9, 2026, 4 months before the first Texas case, the government completed a sterile fly dispersal facility at Moore Air Base in Edinburgh, Texas. On April 17th, they broke ground on a full production facility at the same base, $750 million. When it's operational in 2027, it'll produce 300 million sterile flies per week on American soil for the first time in history. Right now, 4 million sterile flies per week are already being dropped over the border zone. 8,000 traps are being monitored along the Rio Grande. The same playbook from 1958, breed them, blast them, drop them, is being loaded up again. 60 years later, same science, same planes, same bet. And here's the part that keeps the entomologists up at night. In 1972, the screwworm came back across the border so hard that Texas recorded 90,000 confirmed cases in a single year. 90,000. The sterile fly program couldn't produce enough flies fast enough. The population on the Mexican side was too large. That crisis is the reason the U.S. and Mexico built the Joint Eradication Commission and pushed all the way to Panama. The barrier at the Darien Gap was the lesson learned from 1972. As long as the flies exist south of Panama, the only thing standing between them and American cattle is a line of sterile males dropped from planes. If that line breaks, because of funding cuts, political instability in the countries it passes through, or a surge too large to match, the flies walk north the same way they did in '72. 4 cases in Zavala County is not 1972. Not yet. The response this time is faster, better funded, and backed by 60 years of proven science. Knippling's crazy idea still works. The female still mates once. The math still holds. But the math only holds if you keep producing enough flies. And the flies are being made in Panama, shipped through Central America, and dropped over a jungle by an international partnership that depends on cooperation between countries that don't always cooperate. 1 budget cut, 1 political dispute, 1 year of reduced production. That's all it takes to open a gap. Edward Knipling died in 2000. He never saw the screwworm come back. He spent 60 years of his life turning a crazy idea about sterile flies into the most successful insect eradication program in human history. He and Bushland won the World Food Prize for it. They saved American ranching. They pushed a flesh-eating parasite from Texas to Panama using nothing but radiation and the fact that a female fly only falls in love once. Now the thing they killed is knocking on the door again. And the only tool we have to stop it is the same tool they invented in 1937. A line of sterile flies, dropped from planes, held by a partnership, Funded by a budget. That's it. That's what's standing between 4 cases and 90,000.